Gravity Falls, Season 1, Carpet Diem, which is another one of those Gravity Falls titles that I don't quite get what the reference is supposed to be. I mean, I get the carpet part. It's the Carpe Diem that is the reference here, and that I don't quite understand. If somebody sees something that I'm missing, please let me know. Anyway, weird inscrutable title aside, this was a fantastic episode. It was jam-packed full of stuff, and I've actually gone back and reshot this episode review a couple of times because I was debating whether or not to share a theory that I have with you guys, considering that the show's over and the theory's probably been answered one way or another by now. I did eventually decide to share the theory with you guys. Don't confirm in the comments 100% whether or not it's true. I still want to be surprised. But I wouldn't mind knowing if I have managed to work out a couple of things here and there. First, let's talk about the plot of this episode. Mabel has been having her friends over more and more recently for sleepovers, enough so that Dipper is starting to feel put off by it. He no longer feels like he has a space in their shared room, so he spends the night trying to find somewhere else to sleep. This sets up our conflict for the episode, that is, Dipper and Mabel are growing up, and eventually they're not going to be able to share a room anymore. And even though I will spoil it right now and say, they do decide to continue to share a room as of the end of this episode, they are different gender siblings who are encroaching on puberty. This is something they're going to have to think about again relatively soon. Assuming that they don't have separate rooms back home, in which case once they go back home from Gravity Falls it won't be an issue anymore. Anyway, rather than just talk about their problems like regular people, Dipper decides that he wants his own room, and when a room is uncovered in the Mystery Shack, a room which up to that point had been unknown, the two of them start competing for it. Now, this room is pretty mysterious. In fact, the shag carpet in the room is labeled as an experiment and has a weird design drawn on it. And when static electricity is built up by walking on the carpet, should the statically charged person touch someone else, they swap bodies. That's right. Mabel and Dipper switch bodies. And now we've got the basic Freaky Friday plot, except they don't really worry about people finding out they've switched bodies. They don't tell anybody, they don't go out of their way to tell anybody, but they don't make a pact to live each other's lives perfectly so that no one finds out until they can find a way to switch back. In fact, they're pretty sure how to switch back immediately. What they do instead is try to sabotage each other's chances of getting the room. Stan is literally making them compete to see which of them can suck up the most and therefore earn the room. And they each get their comeuppance for this. Dipper ends up having to spend a night with Mabel's friends in a very uncomfortable situation where he's forced to listen to them read what is basically this universe's version of Twilight. I can think of no worse punishment than that. And Mabel gets to have the birds and the bees talk with Stan. Stan thinking that she's a boy at the time. That might actually be a worse punishment, though the other one's Twilight, so might is a very strong might in this case. They eventually talk it out. Dipper wins the room, moves in, but then they both realize that they aren't ready to be apart. They miss each other. And they continue on with nothing really having changed. Though they do get rid of the carpet, thankfully. And there is far more that happens in this episode, more that isn't directly linked to the plot. The carpet is used in some fantastic gags. For example, Seuss and Waddles actually switch bodies for a while, and it's absolutely hysterical. Waddles in Seuss's body is the funniest thing in this episode, by far. In fact, there's this little gag that goes on in the background where this, I would call her attractive for an animated character, young woman, completely falls for Waddles Seuss. And once Waddles and Seuss switch bodies back, she suddenly can't stand Seuss anymore because apparently she loved Waddles. That's hilarious. A little weird, but hilarious. We also got a scene where Dipper and Mabel's friends were all swapping bodies pretty randomly. It was a pretty good gag, which was quite funny as well. I still really like Mabel's friends, and seeing them in this situation and taking the weirdness of the situation in stride the same way that the Pines twins do was quite a treat. Having them in any episode, though, is quite a treat. In the end, this was another funny, yet touching, yet weird, yet intriguing episode of this show. It was one of the most densely packed up to this point, but still managed to tell a great story in the amount of time that it had without things feeling too rushed. And as I may have implied earlier, there was a little bit shoved into the background of this episode that really got me thinking. First of all, that room. A room which has this carpet in it, which, in addition to the general aesthetic of the room, suggests that whoever used this room was experimenting with the weirdness of the town. Kind of the same way that Dipper now experiments with the weirdness of the town. And they make a big deal about finding this room, finding a hidden room in the Mystery Shack, which this isn't the first time this has happened, if I'm recalling correctly. And even Stan doesn't seem to know where the room came from, but there's no way that can be true. It's just not possible. He has his own secret rooms. Of course he would know if there were any other secret rooms. And this is confirmed when we see him react to finding a pair of eyeglasses in the sealed off room. We see his facade crumble and he has an emotional reaction to seeing these eyeglasses. None of the other characters see it, so there's no follow-up to it. But we do see him eyeing the eyeglasses again later. He's definitely got something on his mind because he found these. And it got me thinking. I think Stan has a brother. A twin brother, in fact. I think a brother specifically because they were masculine eyeglasses, and I think a twin brother for a couple of reasons. First of all, Stan is a blood relative of Dipper and Mabel, and twins run in families. Second of all, it goes out of its way to explain why Stan was so immediately taken by the wax sculpture of himself, because it reminded him, consciously or unconsciously, of his brother. So Stan, I think, has this brother who is no longer in his life. Either he died, or they're estranged, or they just grew apart. And I think it's more the latter than anything else, since one of the themes of this episode was twins growing apart. With the amount of focus they've been putting on this since the show started, now that I realize the focus is there looking back, I really do imagine that we're going to get some definitive confirmation one way or another in regards to this theory relatively soon. And of course, as I said, the show's already over, so anyone who's watched the show before knows already whether or not this is true. So if I'm completely wrong, don't laugh at me too hard, please. But I definitely do think this is the case, and it was a lot of fun putting the pieces together. Old, already completed show, or not. Overall, though, this was a fantastic episode. I really enjoyed it. I am really glad that I got to see it. I am still absolutely adoring this show, and I cannot wait to watch the next one. As per usual, though, I'd like to ask, what did you think of this episode if you have seen it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.